One of the first things I always like to do is ask about the family. So does Anna get hazard pay for being your life partner? That's what I want to know first.
It's hilarious because I joke with a couple other sports writer, one a former sports writer buddies from Columbus. We all three of us have wives who know nothing about sports and do not care about sports,
Which is perfect.
Yeah, it in many ways it's great.
It's a nice balance.
Yes, and but sometimes they just say funny stuff, and I won't out Anna.
Please don't, because I don't want to get in the middle of you getting in trouble. I don't want to be the reason you get on the couch tonight.
Offhand, I can't think of anything she said. We always, it's Todd Jones and Aaron Portzline. Aaron covers the Blue Jackets for The Athletic, and he's very popular. And his wife Kate, he just has to laugh sometimes. And one time he tested her. He said, "I'll bet you couldn't name 3 baseball players of any kind," because they were talking. And she says she's always kind of bright and bushy-tailed. She goes, "Yeah, I could." And he goes, "Okay, all right, name 3." And she said, "Babe Ruth." And he said, "Okay, that's 1." And then she went, "Ricky Mantle." and Porty said, "Okay, this conversation is over."
Done. Oh, I love it. And Nick is he's sort of in the business, right? Isn't he a photographer?
Yeah, he's more in video marketing, but he just has done some work for us, kind of like Joe Hermit's son Elijah, who did a lot more work for us. But he's done a few little side things. He works for a advertising firm in Pittsburgh called Oyster Creative.
Got it.
And he's doing very well with them, but he just does a couple side hustles for us just for fun. I mean, I got him in he did the national championship game in LA because it was a family trip. We all just went out there and had a good time in Los Angeles, and I got him a credential for that, and he was like really blown away by SoFi Stadium. And I
heard it's nice.
I'm giving access to these places, and I've had a great career, 30 counting 80, let's see, 38 years. Oh my God. Anyway, retirement is on the horizon, and considering Sunday night, I think I'll do a coffee table book on Penn State basketball's most crushing losses. What do you think?
We'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. But I just appreciate that a U.S. basketball writers Hall of Famer is giving me a little time in his day. So
3 of us together at that Rutgers game. Dana O'Neill was right next to us, and Dick Girardi was right behind us.
Oh wow! I want to get to that because I want to give it its due time. But first, I want to backtrack. How does a guy from Ohio State, from the state of Ohio, end up? Was it always going to be writing, or how did you fall into it?
My degree was in industrial design. I was a very good functional illustrator, but I wouldn't call myself an artist. When I'd see real artists, I would always be envious. They could just do brush strokes, and all of a sudden you'd have this beautiful creation, maybe abstract, maybe realist. I was very good at it was like a good duplicator. I was probably the best illustrator in my class at Ohio State, but I didn't feel like I was an artist. It didn't really make me happy. And during that time in 1981, I got a part-time job at the Columbus Dispatch answering phones. The next year, I did my first high school football game between Eastmore and Walnut Ridge high schools, and saw a byline the next morning. And I'd moved back home for a few months with my mom and dad, and my mom put the newspaper out with a circle around my byline, and I went, "Wow, this is cool."
You made it. Did you have to sneak out in the dead of night, being an Ohio State grad, to start covering Penn State?
Well, when you become a professional, I think by the time, you're taught by journalists, you're taught by other reporters. There's no cheering in the press box. I think by the time I was actually covering Ohio Bobcats basketball with Fran Fraschilla was a young assistant on that staff. Wow. When I first met him under Danny Nee. I understood by that time you don't root for Ohio State, and that was pretty much I think that 85 '95 Rose Bowl was the last time I actually rooted for the Buckeyes. I didn't care.
Right, right.
Probably Ohio State basketball under Gary Williams, I was still kind of a fan. But by the time I took the Patriot News job in '89 and covered my first Penn State basketball season, which was the year after you left, you and Hovass had just taken off, and Christian Appleman, I think, the year before, right? '89.
Yeah, you must have been a very diligent churchgoer to not have to watch me playing basketball. So good for you.
Well, I've
you
kept in
came
touch
just at the right time.
I've kept in touch with Hovass, even though I didn't technically cover him,
Yeah.
because of his work with the Japan national women's team and now the men's team.
Yeah.
And I actually connected him and Fran Fraschilla when he was trying to weigh his options on what he would do, because Franny knows everything about
everybody. Yeah.
basketball, and he knows a lot of agents. So I put them together, and
Yeah, he really appreciated that too.
Well, he did. He really did.
Because he was the darling of the Olympics, so it was kind of like one of those things where he definitely had options.
Yes, he did have options. I'm sure you know. And he ended up taking the men's job. I think they pretty much insisted upon it, the Japan national team. And guess who he coached last summer in summer league play? Kisei Tominaga from Nebraska, who's kind of taken the league by storm as this crazy wild feral cat, but really fun to watch. I mean, he's
awesome. The first time I got to see them play last summer, because I follow them on the courtside 1981, you can see the games, and that was one of the first things I said after the game was, I said, man, I love the swag of your point guard, and he is so fun to watch. Like, I'll watch him when he's not playing Penn State.
He just doesn't care in a good way. You know what I mean? I mean, he is always upbeat and positive energy.
Yeah, that's a great addition, and I mean, I'm happy for him, and I'm also happy for Tom. They played this past weekend in the tournament, and they worked Iran and Bahrain, both kind of important games for them, and I can already see the change happen in their bounce, their confidence
in the men's team.
The men's team. Yeah.
He's got a certain style that it's almost like Paul West had at Loyola Marymount, 35 years ago, whenever that was. I mean, they
like to shoot the three, just like him.
Joe Crispin at Rowan, they play a lot the same way.
It's funny that
Joe loves that whole system, and he's going to wear you out and play 10 guys and shoot the three and run.
I listen to him and John on their podcast. I watch their podcast, and they are definitely basketball nerds and show me every week what I don't know about the game, and I'm okay with that.
Well, you never learn everything. That's what's great about the game.
Oh, but yeah, I think people would be surprised at how, there's some fundamental stuff, and I can watch a game and sort of evaluate it, but like they're like the nuances that just basketball junkies. I'll put you in this category too. It's like you just watch the game all the time. Like, I'm that way with music. I'm not that way with basketball, but I know enough to kind of get by, I guess.
I will watch low major games. That's what's weird about me. So when the tournament comes around, like I had watched the North Texas Mean Green a couple of years ago, and I picked them to upset Purdue, and because I'd seen them, I called up Scott Para at Rice, who coaches in that league, and I said, I saw these guys. Can they beat Purdue? He goes, absolutely, they can beat Purdue. And so I picked him because I will watch that stuff. Nobody does that, but
do you have a tradition, March Madness tradition, that you do every year?
Well, we used to when I was working in Columbus, and then I moved to originally we lived in Harrisburg and then lived in Edders until 1998, and then we moved to Chester County in '98, Downingtown. But for years after we moved away, I would drive back to Columbus to get in this NCAA auction, and it was about 15 of us. 12 to 15 of us. It was great. I don't know if I've never heard of this anywhere else, but you auction off all 60, back then it was 65 teams, to the highest bidder. and you own that team, then you're bidding real money on that team, and how much you get back depends on how your teams do. If you won your first round game, you get 2% of the total pot. Won your second round game, you get 4% of the total pot. When you make it to the Sweet 16, you get 8%. So like in 91, I know I spent $333 on UNLV. It was like a huge amount, back then.
Yeah.
And that was actually the first Final Four I went to in Indianapolis, that I was actually there watching my Rebels melt down to Duke in that famous game in the semifinals, and I didn't get my money back. I just needed them to win that game, and I would have made $100. But no.
I would be bummed for you, but Grant was in that game, so it was
nice. And UNLV didn't play that well. And then the other thing I was involved in that you might have heard of was a thing called Moo's March Madness, run by the former McDevitt High School football coach for Chapman, Harry Chapman IV.
Okay.
They won the state title in 95, and Ford is just a nut. I mean, he had a whole staff full of guys who were 28, and he was about 30. And they said to themselves, I did a giant spread on this about 4 years ago, because it was crazy. It was so much fun. You would call up on the phone. This is like the mid to late 90s, and then into the early
for the cell phone.
Yeah, you would actually. They had people at Ford's apartment in Colonial Park answering the phones to take bets.
Wow. Holy cow.
You got seated with $150 of play money, and then you could bid it in $10 increments on whichever team in any part of the tournament. But once you were out, you were out. If all your play money was gone, you were out. So against the spread, against whatever the spread was in that day's Patriot News, printed in that morning's Patriot News at that point. And they kept track of all this stuff without even a computer spreadsheet. They were writing it down back then in the late. Now there's no internet. There's no internet that people used back in the late 90s. And it was wild, and it spread like wildfire. I'll send you the link.
Please do. I'd be interested in that.
I mean, it got so big that it started spreading up the East Coast into Philadelphia and New York. And next thing I know, I was going to the Final Four, and Seth Davis told me he was in it. I said, "What?"
Wow.
Because he was from Harrisburg. I said, "You're in Moo's March Madness?" He goes, so every time we'd see each other, like I remember seeing him in Tampa in 99, the year Connecticut upset Duke. He, of course, had Duke, and he was preparing a big book on the 99 Duke team with Shane Battier and Elton Brand. Had they won. And I had bought Ohio State, or I had a giant bet on Ohio State against who were they playing? I can't remember who it was against. Anyway, we both watched this was our big bet. Like if it blew, it busted, we were out. And that's what I would do. I kind of save up my play money until the end, and then bet everything at the Final Four. And I never quite won. But if
does it still exist?
If you want, no, it's gone. If you won the whole thing, it was like $7,000.
Whoa!
But it got a little crazy and got out of hand.
That's probably why.
And as soon as I would see Seth at the Final Four, our eyes would meet, and we'd say simultaneously, "How you doing, the Moose?" He's still in.
That is awesome. So tell me, the first year, 1989, you actually had you hit the ground running with some winning basketball, because Money, Freddie, Duran, those guys, they won 20 games every year. They were lacing them up. So what was that, 89?
Ed Fogel was still on that team, 89,
yeah.
90.
His red shirt year, yep.
My first game was against, they were playing Brigham Young at Rec Hall. And Nick Horvath, my first sports editor, had hired me specifically because of your team making a real run at the NCAA tournament and couldn't quite get over the hump at Rutgers in the A-10 final. And he said, "I need a basketball guy. I need somebody who can cover this team." And how he found me in Columbus, and
Got it.
that's why I
Sorry about
came.
that,
So,
man. Yeah, Rutgers didn't
yeah.
go so well.
Well, right. Yeah, I remember Roger Reed. You remember him, the like doing this on the sideline, wobbling around. And then the next game I covered was just a couple weeks later, that crazy game where they had students in line all the way around Rec Hall for Temple. And they
Yeah.
beat Temple by a point, and they could never beat Temple up until then. John
No,
Chaney's
we could never beat Temple. We always choked. We always had them on the ropes, and it's yeah.
Wasn't
It
there
was
like a 9-point lead with a minute and a half to go? I heard in
like
'87.
a minute 23 in Rec Hall. And there was like 3 games like that where we had we were kind of like the transition between the not knowing how to win and winning. So just those little things that could have gotten us over the hump we hadn't figured out yet.
They finally beat that team.
Yeah.
And they carried Bruce Parkhill off the court. It was a crazy scene.
I was at that game because I was in grad school. So I was happy to see it.
I had never seen a place like Rec Hall. I was like, what is this? It's like going back in time to the 30s. It would look like a gym, and you're sitting up on that track up on a riser. You're people, they started coming in from Big Ten schools in '93, and I would just laugh at the reactions of these guys from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Purdue, and my old friends from Ohio State. And our chairs would, if you weren't careful, the chairs would like fall backward over the risers, and it was crazy.
Great atmosphere.
In that place when the Fab Five came in '93 was electric. It was.
I was there.
Yeah.
And it was and that team. The good thing about that is we had Matt Gaudio in those days, and Matt was just he didn't care who they were. Actually, all those guys they just had a different confidence.
Matt's back had been hurt, so he played in '92, but he couldn't play in '93.
That first game, and then he came back.
The first game of the Big Ten, and that's why they just weren't very good. They were 2-16. The Big Ten their first year. They had Duran Hayes, and they had Amici and Michael Jennings, and nobody else. I mean, it was tough.
Yeah.
But the next year, Gaudio came back, and they were pretty good. They were 6-12 in the league, but they upset Purdue with Glenn Robinson the year he was Player of the Year, National Player of the Year. You remember he squared off. They got mixed up, and they got hooked up. And Gaudio squared off with Glenn Robinson, and I don't think I've ever heard an arena that loud, because it looked like they were coming to come to blood, you
did not toil with Matt. That's what I loved about it.
It was like Maurice Lucas and Chocolate Thunder. People were going nuts, and then they beat them. I'll never forget this, because there was an ice storm that night, and I had to stay in the Nittany Lion Inn. I had to stay over because there was no way to get home. I wasn't going to go home that night.
Right.
And Parkhill, this is how tightly wound he was, and this. I went to that smoker they used to have in the Nittany Lion Inn, the post game.
Yeah.
And there's these old geriatrics in there, and I'm just written this, and I'm having a blast. It's my 5th season, and they're competitive, and they're playing the old league that I grew up with, and they just beat number 7 ranked team in the nation. And Bruce is just, he's nursing his vodka tonic. I was like, dude, loosen up. You just beat Glenn Robinson. He goes, I'm already thinking about Northwestern.
That was the curse. And, like so many people were surprised when he retired, but I remember sitting in his office when I was in grad school in the early 90s, just saying, man, this job is going to kill you if you don't get out. You just don't look healthy. And thank goodness he's 45 when he retired. Good for him.
Pat Flannery did the same thing. He had to get out. It was like a bad mistress that basketball is to those guys. And they love it, and yet it controls them. And it controls their whole lives, and it will eat you up. Pat
was a big influence for you, wasn't he?
Pat
Flannery,
yeah, he's probably my best lasting friend in coaching. He gave me full access when they made the 05 tournament, and I went to Oklahoma City Nick said, sure. I said, these guys have a chance to do a little damage. We should cover them, because I'd covered, I think, 12 Bucknell games that year.
Right.
And they had a really unique team that fit together with different guys. And they had the big center, McNaughton from Germany, which made him different than most low majors. And sure
because they couldn't get a guy over 6'7" back then.
Usually low majors can't do that. That's the one thing they lack. But Chris McNaughton could play, and they had other guys. I mean, they had Kevin Betancourt, who was a really good perimeter shooter. They had Abe Badmus, who was a terrific little point guard from Chicago, and they had done damage. They had beaten Pittsburgh in the Peterson Center, the first non-conference opponent to ever beat Pitt in there.
Wow, I didn't know that.
They had beaten they beat Syracuse at Syracuse. They were they'd beaten St. Joe's at Hawk Hill. I was there for these games.
Right.
And I told Nick, and he said, okay, all right. So when I went out there, Pat gave me full access. I was in the team meetings and everything. And I'll never forget this. The day before the game, you have the shoot around at the NCAA tournament. It's in Oklahoma City, which was the spec arena they built for the Thunder, but it was years before the Thunder moved there from Seattle. They built the place on spec. It's this beautiful 15,000
been there,
arena, and they don't have a team. It's really funny. And Kansas was in there, their opponent, and Pat brought them out to watch Kansas's walkthrough. The day before, and they weren't even working, man. They were just doing a dunk contest.
They're showing off for their fans.
Yes, and there's probably 5,000 fans there. They brought the whole state of Kansas, one state south,
right?
And they're all whooping and hollering. And Pat's talking to the guys. We're kind of in the opening of a porthole, but looking at the floor. He said, "Look at them. They don't even take you seriously." They don't even, it was brilliant. Great stuff. It was brilliant. And the next day, it was one of the biggest upsets in the history of the NCAA tournament, and it was amazing.
Yeah. So tell me some of your. I'm not going to say top 5. Give me 3 top Penn State basketball games that you've witnessed that come to mind.
I can give you 5.
Give me 5. All right.
I would say, one of them's a loss, the 93 Indiana double overtime game.
Yeah.
And it was insane that 93 team had no business playing with Indiana, the number 1 team in the nation. It was Bob Knight's first trip to Penn State after he heard about Penn State joining the league. It took forever for them to integrate Penn State into the league. They had been announced as a new member 3.5 years before, in December of 89.
Yeah, that was like my last semester of school, I remember. Yeah.
December of 89, and they're finally, this is Indiana's first trip. And when Knight heard about it, he was pissed off because he was totally blindsided. And he said, "I've been to Penn State. It's a goddamn camping trip. There's nothing around for 100 miles." And so the Nittany Lion mascot dressed up in camping gear and had a little tent on the corner of the court.
Oh, man.
And it was a wild atmosphere. And they had the game, and then Sam Licklider and Gene Monge screwed it up at the end. Gene Monge doesn't get the discredit he deserves.
Because he could have overruled, right?
He should have seen the jersey pull. He was the guy on the side at the inbound pass who should have seen the jersey pull by Chris Reynolds, which should have been an intentional foul, 2 shots and the ball. That's game over. That's game over. Or even a play on, because Greg Bartram hit a reverse dunk on the breakaway. They were up 4 for that. But Gene Monge didn't tweet. He swallowed his whistle or didn't see it. I mean, it's got to be an intentional foul. And people don't remember that Tim Brando and Bill Raftery were doing that game. It was a big-time ESPN crew. And if you go back and look at the footage, I mean, Raftery is saying, this is the kind of thing that when you're a coach, it just tears your heart out.
Bill Raftery did my last game, actually, against Villanova.
That's got
love that guy.
Then UCLA at the Carrier Dome in '91. We were stunned Brennan and I, Mark Brennan and I, were sitting next to each other.
Hey, college icon, you and Brennan are the benchmark, man, for
We're
covering
actually
Penn State basketball, for the good and the bad. You
we
got
could we could write the Penn State basketball encyclopedia, but who would buy it? That's the problem. We were sitting on a sideline, and a New York Times photographer had a strobe set up on the basket, and so with the camera, and you remote controlled. And when Jennings had his run out dunk to give them the lead, I think it was 46-44 or something, they took a shot of the dunk that was in the New York Times, and in blurry in the background, there's me and Brennan's giant head.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah, we're in the New York Times. Yeah.
And I don't know if Mark would appreciate you talking about his dome like that, man.
he's got an Oprah Winfrey head, man. It's size 8. Yeah. He's got a Michael Robinson head. They had to make him a new helmet, because he had a head so big. Do you know that?
I'm not touching that. I am not touching that.
They had to make him. Tommy Venturino said they made him a custom helmet because he had a size 8.
You even have Viggy in on it. That's horrible. Horrible.
And then so that was insane. I mean, they beat a UCLA team with 47 future NBA seasons among 6 guys.
Right.
And Penn State had 0. I mean, I don't think they even had a guy go to Portsmouth, let alone drafted.
Park Hill's masterpiece, man. That dude had the X's and O's.
It was. And Dave Seipert told me some great stuff about how he was breaking down film about little tells that UCLA had when they were going to do certain thing. And he found that Don McLean would bring the ball down below his waist. And they told everyone about that, when you've got a chance at a pick there. And sure enough, late in the game, Freddie Barnes, when he got back in after foul trouble, I think it was either he or Money Brown, pawed the ball away. And that was a big steal. I mean, they really frustrated McLean. It was Park Hill's masterpiece. I would say next might be, well, these are in no particular order, but I made out a list. People would never think of this, but the 01 Illinois, the rest of them are all 01 games. And it's kind of sad that we haven't had one of these great games in 22 years, but that's the truth. The 01 Illinois game, you probably don't even remember it. But
that's when I'm trying to think of who. I know our team, but they had
in the Jordan Center 98-95 in overtime. And John Crispin hopped up on the press table and did this.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was a really good Illinois team.
Their backcourt was
they were a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. And that was a wild game. That team led the Big Ten, that Penn State team led the Big Ten in scoring and led the Big Ten in points allowed. I mean, they were crazy. They went after steals, and if they didn't get them, it was just a dunk, and they'd run the other way.
Titus.
Yeah. I mean, Titus Ivory. We'll get to him.
Okay.
And the next 2 would be the Michigan State game in Chicago later that year.
Right. Jazzy Klein Hurd.
They may have needed it to make the tournament, or maybe not. I don't think they did, but they certainly would have been sweating had they not won it. I mean, they ended up with a 7 seed, so you would think they didn't really need it, but they kind of thought they did.
Right.
And they kind of hung in there. They were down like 19-8 at the beginning of the game, and it looks like, Mo Peterson was on that team, right?
Yes.
It was
Richardson.
Jason Richardson, tough team, defending national champions, and they were really good. I went back and watched a few minutes of that game just a couple nights ago, and that was a incredibly good basketball game. I mean, just high level. And then Joe Crispin makes the duck under 3 to give him a 4-point lead with under a minute, and Wayne Larrabee says, "Ring it up."
Good imitation. Good imitation.
Well, he's Mr. Chicago, so
yes.
And they needed. I think they thought they needed. They got blown out by Iowa in the next round, but they ended up as a 7 seed. And then the last game, of course, is the North Carolina game. 2 weeks later in the second round in New Orleans, which the whole thing was just a rodeo. The whole stay down there from the plane flight in where they thought they were going to die. Temple's plane got struck by lightning in the same
Wow. I don't think I heard that story.
Mine about the Penn State team. You didn't hear
No,
that?
about the Temple plane getting hit.
Yeah,
I
they got
remember the
struck
Penn.
by lightning, and you know about the Penn State plane. It like dropped 2,000 feet on the way in, and
Yeah.
Marcus Banna yelled out, "I don't want to die with you people." And Marco Patukin said, "We don't want to die with you either, Marcus." The team doctor.
Margot, love me some Margot. Yeah.
And they beat Providence in a 7-10 game. Providence was actually favored in that game.
Yeah, their guard that was so good, and Joe, I think, took it as a personal.
John Linehan, yeah.
Yeah, Linehan, that's it.
He had at least one steal, maybe the best college on-ball defender I've ever seen. And I'd watched a lot of Big East that year because the Big East was still really good. Yeah. Tim Welsh was that coach. And I told John in the pre-game press conference, the 2 days before they left, 3 days before, I said, "You know about John Linehan? I mean, he's going to get up in you." And he goes, and he was like, Joe was like, I got it. And the first couple possessions, one was he knocked the ball off of Joe's foot out of bounds, Providence ball. And another time he almost got a steal and Joe got it back. And Titus came up to him a few minutes later, the first time out, and said, why don't you let me bring the ball up and you run off picks? And they just made that decision on their own without Jerry's input or anything.
Yeah.
And Titus remembers saying, "Now don't be prideful." And
that sounds like Titus.
Titus saying it. And Joe went along with it, and it ended up changing the game because Joe ran John Linehan off picks and screens the whole damn game. Joe didn't have a great game, but he wore out John Linehan. John Linehan took himself out of the game with 6 minutes to go because he was exhausted.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I just remember that Joe definitely got the better of him. I don't remember him checking out.
And John Linehan did not get a steal. The first game all year, he didn't get a steal. And they beat Providence 69-59. And then 2 days later, no one could believe it. They upset North Carolina, a 2 seed, number 6 ranked team in the nation, 82-74, and almost broke the NCAA record for steals. They had 18 steals. They just kept ducking into passing lanes and gambling. And Carolina had, they had
Peppers, Curry
and the ACC Player of the Year. Who was it? I can't remember his name. Guard. Oh my God. Oh, that's horrible.
I'm old. I can't remember.
Well, I can't.
Senior moment.
Never went anywhere in the NBA, but he was ACC Player of the Year. And John Crispin did a number on him defensively.
John was a big guard, big athletic guard. So he could guard when he wanted to.
It's going to drive me crazy. I gotta look it up. But
you definitely got to look that up because
those are my five. Those are my
no one was giving them a chance, but and then Titus had a little bit more of an incentive because they weren't giving him any love on the recruiting trail. So
and he was a Carolina guy.
And he's from Charlotte area. So he and that's another one of those guys that I wish I had a chance to play with because he just had a love of the game, always a smile on his face, but played hard. Great leader. And defensively he was the stopper, so that kind of always would
he was all over the stat sheet every game. I mean, you've never seen a guy. I mean, look at this roster. They had Jason Capel, Brendan Haywood, who towered above everyone else from Penn State. I mean, Jazzy was the tallest Penn State guy, and he was like 6'8", I think.
6'8", 6'9".
Smith might have been 6'8". Joseph Forte is the guy.
Forte, yes.
ACC Player of the Year. And John, it wasn't only John, but mainly John, locked him up 6 points, 2 rebounds, and that was it. I mean, a non-entity.
I'm impressed you got those numbers down, man. You were definitely a basketball junkie. So give me the guys, the five Penn Staters on more than Mount Rushmore, because I want five.
Well, people probably wonder, why didn't I choose the 2000 Kentucky game that year? They went to Kentucky and won.
I actually broadcast that game. That was fun to be.
Yeah. You did, didn't you? Yeah, on ESPN Plus, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's other games you could. The 91 Temple game where they carried Bruce off the floor, and some other. The 09 Illinois game, which they thought got him in the tournament, where Taylor Battle threw up the final shot and wove through like all five guys on the Illinois defense. Here's my guys, and I think Jarrett Stevens would be on that list, the top five. He didn't have the good fortune to really be an integral part of any of the NCAA teams, although he could have on the 96 team, and Jerry should have played him more, I think, and all those guys believe that.
Right.
Gaudio especially wondered why Jarrett didn't play more, because he could have really helped out, but he was on that team, but he was just a freshman. He actually played against Terrell Owens late in the
Tennessee Chattanooga. That's right.
Yeah. But Jarrett was just a hell of I think he was 6'4.5" and played like he was 6'7". He just had these rocket thruster.
Man, I'll give him at least 6'5.5".
He told me himself he was 6'4.5".
All right.
Put together, I mean, he was like Barkley in a way.
Yeah.
He
so athletic.
He could really leap until that Georgia dope.
Hard foul in NIT, dirty.
Wrecked his knee. Really, really dirty, horrible play.
Yeah.
Taylor Battle has to be on the list, simply for how he lifted a program that was really going nowhere for 4 years under Ed. They were just kind of treading water, and he made the difference, man. 08, 09.
How many clutch shots did he hit?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I can't think of anybody else who even comes close to hitting clutch shots like he did.
He could get shut down. He could go 2 for 12, but when it was money time and he had to hit one, he hit them. I mean, he was an incredible money player. Loved him, and he had weaknesses in his game. He wasn't a future pro, but he was a Pied Piper. I mean, he carried the rest of those guys along on a very interesting team with Jeff Brooks and David Jackson and Tim Frazier as a freshman. They made the NCAA tournament as
Andrew Jones too that year. Yeah,
Andrew Jones, who's now in the NBA on
the Pistons.
It was a very interesting team that kind of came around when Tim Frazier, as a freshman, kind of switched on for him. So Taylor Battle would be another. Jalen Pickett, I think, just based on this year. I mean, it's the single greatest season, I think, arguably in Penn State history. I mean,
I tell people he's the old black dude in the park with the jean shorts, just wearing everybody out.
Jean shorts, even better, like whole jean.
Wearing his jeans, the full jeans. Yeah, he's that guy.
With a brown belt, you know.
He is that guy. Oh my goodness.
Shirt. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I love his game. You can't speed him up. You're not going to really get him flustered. I got to give Rutgers, to me, is the best defensive team in the Big Ten.
And
so I got to give them their props.
Caleb McConnell is the best single defender. Caleb McConnell was hurting the other night.
Yeah.
Still coming back from his bad back, and he gutted through that game, and he was terrific.
Yeah.
But Steve Pikiell's plan was terrific too, and they did. I mean, I think AJ Hoggard and McConnell and that kid from Virginia Tech, whose name I can't remember, are really the only ones who've stopped Pickett this year, who really disturbed him.
Yeah.
Titus Ivory, because his 01 season, along with Pickett, though might be the two best seasons in the history of Penn State basketball. You talk about stat sheet stuff for that season. I think he was top 10 in like 6 different Big Ten categories.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 3-point percentage, assists, steals, free throw percentage,
rebounds.
He was a guard. I mean, he was an all-around Swiss Army knife who did everything for that team and hit big shots in big games.
And
He had
yeah,
a huge shot in the North Carolina game to pretty much, I
I
think it
remember that.
put with a couple minutes to go.
I remember that.
And
And one of the most beautiful souls that ever graced Penn
yeah,
State
he had
basketball.
a stroke a few years ago, and we were all a little worried about him, but he's all the way back. And
Yep.
and Nikki is helped him along, and Jerry's daughter,
Yep.
and he is a beautiful guy, just a beautiful guy.
Yep.
And the last one has to be Joe Crispin. I mean,
He was a terror, man. Pound for pound, he's like Taylor. He'd take your soul.
Yeah, I mean, willful is the word you
Willful. I love that. I love that. Yes.
He was gonna find a way. And get that look on his face. I mean, I remember him. It was Kim Jones and Brennan and I are talking to him on media day in 2000. And I mean, they haven't made the tournament since the 96 team. And he's now a senior. And he said, we are going to make the NCAA tournament this year. And
right.
he goes, I know you guys don't believe me, but we are going to make and so we all wrote it down and like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Now, you know what? I my opinion changed. He frustrated me a little bit when because he was so willful out there and you could see it. And
what do you mean? What do you mean exactly?
Just he wasn't, and he probably would. I know he would admit to this. He was a handful to coach.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that I always admire about anyone is self-awareness. Yeah. And when he came back and moved to State College, and we were having a conversation, he talked about that, and he also talked about the fact that it's probably best that he didn't play for Coach Parkhill.
we've all speculated about what that meeting of.
I think Coach Parkhill would have been the best thing for him. I think that would have been
Parkhill would not have lost. He would not have lost that battle because he didn't lose any battles. And Joe would have seen his genius in figuring out game plans, and he would have gone along with anything.
Yeah.
But Joe was a handful. And you know, this Seth Lundy 0 for 11 against Rutgers. I don't know if you saw it, but I tried to explain how that can.
I did see it. I love that article, and I bring up that Ohio State game all the time. Yeah, all the time. So when you
tell people what you're talking about. Which game?
Well, it flows perfectly because we were talking about Coach Parkhill. Coach Parkhill is now the associate assistant coach under Ohio State.
Yes.
Penn State. Joe has played his ass off that first half. That was the best first half I'd ever seen him play.
19 points.
We're up 20.
50 to 30 at halftime on senior day, and this is going to ice the NCAA tournament.
Right,
they're 7-8 back when you played 16 games only in the Big Ten season, and they're going to be 8-8, and they got a great RPI. They're going to be in. They got to win at Kentucky. They got to win over Illinois.
Illinois, yeah.
They got some really good wins on their resume. They're going to be in, and then. The Ohio State and not a great Ohio State team just starts not any greater than Rutgers is a great team starts D'ing him up and frustrating him, and they're not going to let Joe beat him, and he just keeps shooting. He just keeps shooting. And I called him up and I texted him and on the way home from the Rutgers game, I said, "What did that remind you of?" He goes, he answered me the next morning at 7:30 because he's a coach. He's a coach at Rowan. He goes, "I was thinking the exact same thing."
Man,
I have to say which game we were talking about. He knew he was 3 of 14, I think, in the second half. Jazzy just lost his shit on him, and they almost came to blows in the locker room, almost came to blows on the sideline because Jazzy was like, "Quit hogging the ball." But willful is what I'm talking about. He was going to will them over.
Yeah. His was a little uglier than Seth because Seth, it seemed like Seth's heart was in the right place. You know, like Joe was just like, I'm shooting and I'm going to take over this game. I don't care what anybody says. It was maddening.
These are two of the best shooters in the history of not just Penn State, but the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Seth Lundy was shooting 444 from 3-point range, second in the whole league. And Joe, we know about Joe. At a critical time at the end of the season when you really got to have a home win, they both fell into the same malaise, and the team did too. And Penn State
Yeah.
lost that game 93-87. And you think, oh my God, they're done. That was their last game of the regular season. They'd
Yeah.
fallen to 7-9 in the league. And
And that's what you probably know this about me. I'm the eternal optimist. And the messages I was getting after the game the other night against Rutgers, and I just tell people, like, besides what I saw happen in Ohio State in 2001, like my senior year that happened, where we got smoked by West Virginia by 30 something, and the next practice, coach didn't roll out the balls. It was one of those, and
what do you do?
That it was just one of those practices where there's no basketball. So I don't need to get into the details of it, but he was challenging our manhood, which he should have done, which any coach would probably do. And the next 3 games, we scored 90 points the next 3 games, and we went on to win 20 games or whatever. So
it was a crucible for you guys. And this is kind of the same opportunity. It was a crucible for that Penn State team. They won a buzzer beater 1-point win over Michigan to probably get them in the tournament, because they had a great RPI of 24.
Right.
But that probably got them in. But then the game that they won, as I previously mentioned, that really certainly got them in, was the win over number 3 ranked Michigan State, which no one thought they could do. So this team has the regular season is still here, but they have the same kind of opportunity before them. And it's the kind of thing is, if they can win, we're talking Tuesday night, if they can win this game at Northwestern, it will be the same kind of crucible that they passed, and it will power them emotionally, energy. It will power
the chemistry, everything. Yeah, I totally agree. And the team that we didn't get to use as an example of that was that 20 team when they had their last 3 regular season games. Lamar didn't play well, and everybody was panicked. And I was like, you know what? They're going to go into the Big Ten tournament, and they're going to go on a roll. And then, of course, COVID came, and it never happened. But I've seen it before, is what I'm saying, and I totally agree with you.
You never know, but the point is, it's a powerful thing when everyone is telling you, well, you're done. Stick a fork in them. You're no good. You choked. And it was a choke job. Let's own it and say what it was. It was a choke job.
Yeah.
It was. You choked. You're worthless. They've already flapped the back cover on your season, and you're the only guys. The guys on the team and the coach are the only ones you have.
Yeah, or the alums.
Yeah. Well, a few people, not many. And if you can overcome that, that on the road and get a win against a vulnerable Northwestern team, like, it's not like Northwestern's going to out athlete them. They're not. Who's struggling, who's lost a couple games, who has kind of had their peak, and now where are they? They're coming home after a couple of ugly road losses.
Right.
They're maybe questioning themselves. So if they make a few shots, man, this is the kind of Northwestern's usually a really good defensive team, but will they be tomorrow night? That's my question. If they're in the normal Northwestern defensive team, who has a terrific defensive specialist assistant in Chris Lowry, then Penn State's going to have a tough time. But if they come out just a step slow, not quite on their game, Penn State is the kind of team, I mean, when defense is not great against them, they roll you. They get open shots, and they get a couple going. They did it to Illinois twice. They did it to Indiana. They did it to good teams.
Yeah, it's fun to watch them. It really is fun to watch them. I mean, obviously you don't want to watch them lose.
So I think Micah Shrewsbury was disappointed in himself that he didn't adapt to the situation. Peichel outcoached him. He said as much himself, and I think he really believes it, that he didn't have a plan C or D to get maybe run Pickett off the ball, give it to Kanye Clary, do something different. Maybe play zone against Rutgers because they can't shoot. Neither I think they need to play zone maybe against Northwestern. They're not a good shooting team. Experiment with that. Experiment with stuff at both ends that people have not seen you do, because this would be a perfect time for it. So I think he's a really good coach, and he's going to cook up something.
Yeah, I love Coach Shrewsbury just as I love Coach Chambers, and I watched his post game, and I admire the fact that he owned it. As a former player, I'm always about the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's, because he can't go out there and make those shots, knock those shots down. But I get it, and I like you believe that he believes that he got out coached, because he said that with conviction, and I admire that, because you don't see that a lot. Now you don't see a coach blaming on the players, but the way he owned it was very admirable. But at the end of the day, as a former player, I want the players knocking down the shots, because Coach Shrewsbury's basketball career is done.
They did the same thing. Indiana did the same thing with hard doubles on Pickett. And he passed out of there, and they just kept hitting one shot another. It was a rout.
Just not a lot. Just hit one extra shot each one of the three.
I mean, if Funk hits one and Lundy hits two, they're cruising. They win by 5
by
or
10.
7.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all they needed. So I don't think the plan was that bad. They were doing what they'd been doing.
Yeah.
But Rutgers is a different brand of defense than either Indiana or Illinois.
Yeah. And I have PTSD about Rutgers too, because we had them in the Atlantic 10 tournament.
89. I won't bring it up.
So that hurts. And Tom actually is very salty about that to this day too.
You know who did that Bucknell, Kansas game on TV that I told you about? Bob Wenzel. He was the color.
Oh no! Oh yes, yeah. I really like him, and he actually, the first time I was ever back in the rack, I'm going to always call it the rack. Yeah. Since my senior year was Seth Lundy's freshman year, because Ron Harper's son was playing, and Wenzel was doing the game for ESPN. So I just went up and reintroduced myself, and I had a really great conversation with him. I remember Coach Parker always liked him too. But yeah, Rutgers and Villanova are the two that just kind of make me get the shakes sometimes. So let's finish with
Wenzel had a couple of guys. You remember Donnell Lumpkin and
yes, of course,
and Earl Duncan. I remember Earl Duncan at the rack my second year, the rack, and we sat right on the court. I remember walking by Parkhill, and he would yap and talk smack, and he walked by Parkhill and said, "Coach, get someone out here who can guard me."
That is hilarious. Oh my God.
Some wild guys, Keith
Hughes.
Yeah,
they had a guy, his name was Eric something. He dropped 50 piece on us my freshman or sophomore year in the rack. Really good.
Keith Hughes. No,
it wasn't Keith Hughes. Okay. No, he was like a 6'7", 2'3". I'm not going to look it up. Yeah. So let's finish up with the Big Ten tournament. What are your thoughts going into the Big Ten tournament next week? Because I know Penn State is playing not to be playing Wednesday is really what they're playing for these next 2 games.
Realistically, it really has nothing to do with what that is true. I mean, you don't want to be playing Wednesday because you're playing a game that has no value in the net, no value really at all. You have to play a 12, 13, 14 seed, and what do you get for that? And you don't get a lot.
Right.
But the bigger issue is they just need wins, and they have to win their last 2, or I think it's moot. I think they have to get to 10-10 because they don't have a great non-conference resume. They didn't really have any bad losses, but there were a couple they left on the table. The one at Clemson just kills them. Overtime loss there. The 2-pointer to Virginia Tech. They just left so many games on the table that could have helped them at this point, and they don't have a great non-conference resume. It's not bad because they don't have any bad losses, but they need wins, man. They've got to get to 10-10, and 10-10.
Is it 10-10 or is it 20 wins? Or you think
20 wins has nothing to do with it? And neither is 10 wins either. It all depends on who you beat, and 10-10 would mean that they've got another quad win at Northwestern
on the road,
and maybe a quad win at home against Maryland. We'll see how that works out. But
because they're like with 3 and 4, right, in the league. Maryland's 3.
Those are 2. Yeah, those are second, third place teams in the league. I think they're both 11 and 7.
Maryland's 3 right now, and Northwestern's 4, but they have the same record.
Okay.
in league.
There's a bunch of teams tied at 11-7. Anyway, they're good opponents. They're not just wins, they're really good wins.
Right.
So if you got those 2 wins and you're 10-10, then you're not playing on, you're playing your first game on Thursday against a competitive team. So I think they need 3 in a row. They got to win at Northwestern, at Maryland, and whoever they play in Chicago. And then I think they're odds on. There's certainly no lock, but odds on to make the tournament. But anything less than that, and I just don't see it.
Right. And beginning of the season, we wouldn't have even been having this conversation. Like no one was expecting them to be in the conversation.
11th, which is where they are now. But it's a weird league. It's not.
Yeah, that middle is all bunched up.
Yeah. And the other thing is they need to get in front of Wisconsin because they got swept by Wisconsin. So the committee never really says they consider this, but if it becomes down to 2 or 3 or 4 teams, they'll throw you out. I mean, I did the committee seminar back in 09, the NCAA seminar when you could do it, where you study how the committee went to Indianapolis. Jerry Palm happened to be my partner. There's 20 reporters in there, and they're teaching you exactly what the process is, and it lasts for a day and a half. And you come down to the last handful of large candidates, and you're looking for anything to differentiate. And if Wisconsin and Penn State are both on the table, well, Wisconsin's going to beat them out. They swept them. That's just all there is to it. So they can't be tied or in a similar situation with Wisconsin. They've got to get above them. I think that's essential.
Right. Well, man, I tell you, you are a wealth of knowledge. You like an encyclopedia. I knew I was going to learn a lot listening to you because
we did a little longer than we were supposed to.
But I don't put a time limit on anybody, especially when it's very interesting. And like you know your shit. And between you and Brennan, you are state college or Penn State basketball as far as I'm concerned, because you guys are fair, knowledgeable. You do your homework. And funny. So
I can never take Mark Brennan's mantle as the dean of NIT writers. And we believe I had an argument. All my sports writer friends were calling me when I had COVID to check in on me. And Lee Barfnick from Omaha, who's retired, who covered Nebraska for decades, he was arguing with me. He goes, "No, Brennan's not the dean of NIT writers. I am." And the funny part is they covered the same game, the one that Pete Lisicki hit the shot.
Yes.
Lincoln. Yeah, they were both there, and they should have.
Yeah. I remember that game because we had to go straight from Iowa to Nebraska or Nebraska to Iowa, I think. But that Nebraska game, this is a crazy story, is in the hotel. Somebody kept setting off the fire alarm in the hotel room. Nebraska fans, obviously. So I open up my door to look outside, and there's this, I'm going to say 6'4", 6'5", I'm going to say, maybe late 50s, gray-haired white guy, butt-ass naked, looking. He's right across the door from me, and I closed the door, and I'm like, man, that looked like Ben Davison, but why would Ben Davison be in Nebraska? Because I had no idea that he.
Ben Davison, the Oakland Raiders?
Yes. Yes. And I can't unsee that. And the only reason, I didn't know he played at Nebraska, and the only reason I knew, because I said it, man, that looked like Ben Davison, but he wouldn't be in Nebraska. Then the next morning, next day, there was a picture of him. He was there for something, and I was like, that was Ben Davison, butt-ass naked, with the door open, looking like, why can't you just peek around the door? Why do you just kind of... So, yeah, that's my Nebraska NIT story, because I was doing radio with Steve Jones all the games back then. And
that was the Lisicki game, right? Didn't he hit the shot to win that, or was that the Iowa game?
That was the Iowa game. They hit the shot to win it, but the Nebraska, I thought Danny was the one that really had the good game against Nebraska.
Well, I wasn't there, and Mark was, and that's why he's the dean of NIT.
Yeah, Mark could verify that for both of us. But hey, man, have fun the rest of the season. Great talking to you. Give the wife my regards for putting up with your tired ass. And I really appreciate the time, man. Thanks.
We could do this forever with beer, but
maybe do it again. Because like I said, I learned a lot from you about the game, because I'm not really a student of the game like you are.
Come on. Come on.
I'm serious, man. That's not false. I'm. If you want to talk music, that's me. But basketball, So,
I'm
all right.